Hey everyone, in this video we will finish up the ledger on this wall, the cap, and then here you can see I'm digging out this trench to run power over to the center island. We do that. I dig out these holes mostly by hand for the footers, for the columns, for the center island bar, frame it up, and then pour the concrete with a ton of rebar in it. I hope this is a great video for you. We get a lot done, and most of all, we're ready for the granite template, which is just awesome. So stay tuned. In the last episode, I think you've probably seen enough of this stonework, but I mentioned that the cap on this one was a little bit jacked. The stone doesn't perfectly line up because it's handmade or whatever, but I just wanted you to see that you can take a block and a piece of sandpaper and sand it out. You can go as fine of a sandpaper as you want to get it back to kind of a polished finish, or you can just seal the stone to get the color and the luster back. Here I went ahead and removed the hurricane bolts. We have hurricane glass now in the sliding door, so no need for those hurricane shutters anymore. So I went ahead and removed the bolts that are fastened into the wall and covered this area with stone, and decided to go ahead and run the cap across the top and then put a 45 and run it down right alongside of the opening there. I think it's going to look really good, and it will be exactly the same on the other side of the glass doors, which is going to look really good and kind of just wrap that whole stone program together. I had to just take the saw and just clean up this edge just a little bit because the opening to the glass doors is not perfectly square, and you could see it when you've got like a 1/4 inch. You can really tell if it's off. So I just made the stones a little bit crooked along with the side of the wall, so it looks like it's square anyway. And then I went ahead and finished the cap all the way back to the bathroom door there. Came out nice. It's a whole lot easier than doing the columns because it's just stacking stones one next to the other until you get to the end there. And it looks a little bit bowed. It's because of the GoPro, and I have it on wide angle. It's actually really straight, looks really good. One thing about the mud up on where it meets into the stucco, you've really got to wipe that mud out of the stucco as best as you can. Otherwise, when you paint it, you end up with a little line. You can see the thin set. It kind of fills in the texture of the stucco. So I just had to make sure that I got as much of that mud out of there as I could. And then I used a screwdriver just to clean up all the little other spots. Here I'm filling the ends with a little bit more thin set just to fill in the spaces and help it to kind of disappear. Well, here I have this set up, and I'm kind of standing there looking at it and measuring, and I'll save you the hours and hours that I agonized over making sure that this was in the right spot. But there was a lot of planning that went into where this center island is going to go. And what I'm doing here is pulling up the pavers for underneath the stone and then digging a trench all the way over to the cabinet so that I can drill a hole down through the cabinet to run electrical over to the center island. I realized if we're going to put the sous vide out there or a crock pot or really anything, that's the place we're going to put it. So this center island had to have, I'm going to just call it a bar. The bar had to have electricity. So I had to cut the framing and get it out of there and then drill the hole down through. And then with my hand, I just kind of dug in underneath it. These pavers are laid down over sand. It's just compacted sand. There's no slab underneath it. There's also conveniently no plumbing underneath it that you're going to run into or anything. So that was really nice. This wire that I'm using is suitable for underground burial without any kind of cover on it. So what I did do, though, which is to code, is put it in a pipe wherever it passes through either a wall or concrete or whatever. So it's in a pipe that passes all the way down into the dirt through the cabinet, and then it's in a pipe within the concrete, and everything else is just buried. Putting these pavers back in is just a chore. I mean, you get them level and they don't fit right. You got to beat on them, and I actually cracked one, and I did kind of cut the edges off of one to get it to slide down in there better. But it came out fine. The whole thing is set about an 1/8 inch high, which will settle down over time, and it'll also settle once I rinse it all out. I couldn't really rinse it now because, as you see, that hole there is about, right now it's only about 10 inches deep, but I ended up going 21 inches deep, and if I wet down this area too much, all the sand would roll into the hole, so I had to just be patient on that. This one I tore up right from the middle, and it was such a job. I had to just drill it multiple times and chip away at it. Finally, I was able to remove it, piece by piece before I could get the shovel in there to pop the other piece out. It was so tight that even after all of this, I still couldn't pop the other half of the paver out that I need to cut flush, cut clean. It wouldn't have mattered, but I went ahead and cut it anyway. And then you'll see here, I used the shovel to dig out pretty good, and then I dug the rest of it by hand and put that little piece of paver back in, because you'll see that once I cut it flush. I was using a board to kind of beat down a little bit more on the pavers that I reinstalled, and then here I'm getting some sand, trying to push and vibrate with the broom, some sand down in between them just to make sure they don't move around. And then I did actually run a little bit of water on it here, but not very much, because I didn't want those holes to fill up with water. This was mostly just so I didn't track sand everywhere.
Got the wire run. It's got conduit that goes through the concrete, but under the pavers it's wire suitable for underground, so don't need to jacket it with a pipe. I'm going to bring this pipe into a box, and then I'll run the metal wire right into the top of the box. I'll put a little junction box right here. Anyway, came out pretty nice. These holes are maybe 14 inches deep. I'm going to put some rebar in there and then tie the rebar up through the pipe, through the block, and that will provide plenty of strength so the thing doesn't topple over. As I look at these tiny little columns here, they sure do look nice. I might just forget the block and form them and pour them so they're even thinner. I'll have to think about that. But off to Home Depot to get some concrete and some rebar.
So this is the next morning. I thought about it overnight, and I really can't make the columns this thin. Even though I think it would look nice because it would just help them to be, less of a eyesore. There's not enough surface area to glue down the granite on the top, I think. So that's why I went ahead and decided just to go with the original plan, which is using the block as the form as I work my way up. Anyway, after digging these out to about 20 inches deep each, I went ahead and started framing it out. And you can see there's just a little bit, I talk about this in a video later on, but there's only about a 1/2 inch rise on this to get it to be level, which is good news, just less work. And the way I built this frame was just to use the clamps to hold the two rails straight. Got the 2x4s in there, flush against the pavers, and then I used just 1/4 inch door skin to cut and reach the finished height. Now, I made this about 1/4 inch too small all the way around because I need something for the block to sit on. I need a level surface for the block to sit on because I'm using the block as the form also. And what I could do is pour this, let it sit overnight, and then tie into it later and build the block up from that. But I didn't want to do that. I wanted to do it all at once. So this wood form is not only holding the concrete in place, but it's holding the first course of block in place also, as you can see there. And I'll just make sure the mud is thick enough that it doesn't roll out and go everywhere. I also decided not to put mud in between each course of block. because number one, it's not necessary, but number two, this is my finished height. So I would have either had to make the footers lower or that top block shorter by whatever distance of mud there was in between each course of block. So totally not necessary because there's a solid beam of concrete right down the middle. But if you know anything about, laying block, you might wonder, well, why didn't you mud each block together? And it just wasn't necessary. All right, I got the form built, got the rebar in. Rebar goes down about 10 inches into the dirt. It's about 20 inches below the pavers, and I hollowed out like a bulb under there so it would act like a plug. Got the electric in, everything's level. I'm going to use these blocks as a form as I work my way up on each side, and these are hammered just about a ½ inch under the finished concrete. And then I'll have to drill a hole in the bottom granite and epoxy a piece of rebar in to hold everything in place once the granite's done. But I'm ready to start mixing concrete. I didn't want to build this all the way up and then pour into it because I really want to see and make sure that I get no air pockets down in there. I've actually used up all my rebar, so I don't really have a piece of rebar to mix it, you know what I mean, to kind of force it down around the rebar, but we'll see. We'll see how it goes. All right, well, this went really well. I put down some extra door skin that I had left over to try to minimize whatever concrete I spilled onto the pavers, and I actually didn't make as much of a mess as I thought I would. I mixed the concrete in a bucket with a concrete mixer or a mortar mixer on a drill, and then just poured it in. I kept it a pretty wet mix so that it would pour nicely and fill, and because I did each course at a time like this, I was able to make sure that I got it was really full. There was no air pockets, and everything was good. So once I got this in, I realized it needed to be tweaked. And on the other one, I kind of leveled it on the way up. This one, I forgot to do that. So my daughter helped me there for a minute, and what I did was I just basically sent screws in between the first course of block and the wood frame to shim it, and it worked out great. I got it level and completely aligned, and then also square. So on this next side, I went ahead and mixed the mud a little bit thicker, and I did that because it was kind of oozing out around the bottom just a little bit, and I wanted to make sure that I didn't overflow it, because if you see, in order for me to get the block down over the electrical service, I couldn't join that pipe until the very last minute. So I put this next course on after I fill that, and then I position the electrical pipe and push it down in, and then just fill it by hand. It took a little longer, but it's fine. I was also able to use the tool for filling it to wiggle it around, make sure there's no air pockets or anything. And then this one, because I was measuring on the way up, I really didn't have a problem. I didn't have to shim it as much as the other one. But I did realize that at the very end here, I had, even though it was level, it was too low. I don't know why that happened. It could be because those concrete blocks on the top there I actually cut. But what I had to do was, once the concrete set up to the point where it was definitely not going to spill out, I ended up elevating that top piece. I think you'll see it here in a minute. Well, they're straight, level, and I had to kind of tweak this one. I'll pull those screws out later, and the gap won't matter because it's solid concrete down the middle. And I'm going to leave the forms on overnight, because right now the forms are really kind of supporting the straightness, I guess, of the columns, because I've got all these little screws in here that I used as wedges, and then I've got some zip ties that I used as wedges,
So it worked out really well to just use the blocks as forms. It's the first time I haven't, really put concrete in between them. But it's not going to matter, and the whole thing's going to be covered with this stone anyway. So looks nice, as you can see. If you line it up with the grill in the back, it's perfectly level. Looks really good. Now, just wait overnight, and I'm going to check it a couple times to make sure it doesn't settle or move around, but I don't think it's going to. So the slope on this wasn't too bad, only about a ½ inch. If you remember from episode 1 or 2, the slope here is about 1.5 inches all the way to 4 inches. And what we're looking at is the concrete pad. And the reason why that matters is because when I wrap these with stone, I'll have to shave a little bit off of the far column to try to minimize what you notice as far as it not being, this column is actually about a ½ inch taller than this column. And I'll have to compensate in the stone somewhere. But anyway, not too bad. And you can see the difference right there. Interestingly, there was no slope this way. It's level, pretty much. So that was nice. Of course, got into some playtime with the dog. We had Lily again for the weekend, and this is the iPhone cinematic option. And if you notice, her face is clear, my arm's blurry, the background's blurry, and it keeps her face clear. It's such a cool setting. I've never used it before, and now it just looks normal, right? So pretty neat. iPhone 13 cinematic. If you've never messed around with it, it really creates a pretty cool effect. So here I'm realizing that the thing is not perfectly square, right? So it's level in every direction, but they're slightly twisted. And so anyway, I had to straighten that out, and that caused a little bit of concrete settling, and it also kind of knocked them out of leveling. But got them perfect, and then I decided to go ahead and set it up just to make sure that everything was clear. Obviously, those two concrete blocks are way too thick, and I'm kind of deciding here what I want to do. So I'll show you this in a minute, but I took 3 courses of the stone. It comes in a 4-course prefab piece, but I took off 1 course, and that determined my finish height. I marked it all with a Sharpie, and then I went ahead and cut them out in the yard with the concrete saw, and that is a little bit higher than what it was, but it's a really great height, and it gives enough room to slide something in underneath, and I'll show you that here in a minute. But first, I wanted to get this form off. I needed to make sure that whatever concrete seeped out underneath the form wasn't too bad. About 1 inch of it will be covered with the stone, but if it was any worse, I would need to scrape it up and clean it with some acid or something. And I was pleasantly surprised to see that it really didn't leak out at all. In the form underneath the cabinet, I used silicone to make sure that nothing leaked out, and I actually forgot to do that on this. Also, I needed to cut off all of the little stainless steel screws that I used to wedge the column to keep it straight. Did kind of just a little sweeping, little cleanup. I'll put some water on this and really work the sand down into those pavers a little later. But that pretty much wraps it up for this week. All right, well, that's it. Another week, another episode, and I'm really glad those columns are done. That's really the last project that I have never done before, building columns like that. They're super solid, and I'll flip the camera around and show you some details about them, but I'm glad that's over. So it's coming along. The space is really looking good. The next thing is granite. That's why I had to get this done this weekend, because hopefully the granite guy will show up at some point during the week, and these columns had to be in their final position to get the slabs measured out for the bar top. Anyway, next week we'll finish up the electrical and hopefully have a video of how they template the granite. And then I'll take you by the granite shop if I can and show you them cutting the granite.
I did that in my last kitchen video in the old house. It was pretty cool, so I'll try to do it again for this one. Anyway, thanks for watching, and let me show you some detail of the columns and how they turned out. So the whole objective from the beginning, if you remember from episode 1 with that drawing, was to stand or sit really anywhere out here and get a full view of the outdoor kitchen grill and just really that whole cabinet that I built back there. And you can see the stools and the columns, even though they'll be a little thicker because they'll have the stone on them, I accomplished that. You can really see right through it. Once the refrigerator, which is right there, once the refrigerator is in, I'll let this truck pass. There's quite a few new homes going in at the end of the street where I live, and the trucks going by. It's terrible. So fortunately it's temporary. Anyway, you can see here that I accomplished what I set out to. I did decide probably stainless steel door here, stainless steel door there. Of course the fridge, you'll see that right here, and then you can see the drawers, and then of course the grill is still the main event. And there'll be this stone right here, all down there, and then all that orange will be painted over. But it's coming together just the way I envisioned it. I've got the concrete level base right here, and then these blocks just really serve as the form. And of course they're not dry, and I've got a pretty big space here because I had to elevate this by almost 1/8 of an inch, 1/4 inch here on the end to get everything to be level. And then this stone up here, what decided the height was really just 3 courses of this stone. So that'll go in there like that. The granite will hang out here about 2 inches so that there's at least an inch overhang where the roundover would be. And then this, of course, will be covered with stone just like this. And it'll look like it goes right through the granite. I think it's gonna look really nice. And by doing it 3 courses, I have plenty of room here to put, a platter, tools. Normally I'd put stuff right here on top, right? But if somebody's sitting here, I have this extra space underneath to stick stuff. And that's obviously because there's no other countertop. Also, I was really concerned about how much space there would be to walk through here. And this is about 35 inches, plenty of room. And I've offset these stools because I ordered a stainless steel tube that will go right here to put your feet on. And then, if you remember, I started off with these columns right here. And after thinking about the space between the column, the stool, the second column, I decided to go back about 4 inches, which doesn't seem like much. But what it enables me to do is offset the bottom here so that I can see what's on it and still leave enough room between the edge and the grill. There's plenty of room here. In fact, I have to take a step over to reach if I'm grilling or whatever. And there's plenty of room to walk right through here if you wanted to. Just take a shortcut into the house. So I agonized over the spacing. There we go. There's a little wide angle for you. I really agonized over spacing everything out because there just isn't very much room over here. But I'm pretty happy. I think it's really ideal. And I didn't sacrifice really anything, I don't think. So once the granite goes in, then I can put this stone on these columns, and I'll concrete board and stone that, and then concrete board the front and work those travertine subway tiles up. And all that really has to wait until the granite goes in because I don't want to end up with a little tiny gap. They're going to have to shim the granite, and I'd rather cut the stone exactly right up to the bottom of the granite and just wait. A little bit of a waste of time, and it's really difficult to not just dive in and put stone on those columns, for instance. Just pickup truck after pickup truck after pickup truck. But anyway, there you go. As always, thanks so much for watching. If you have any ideas or comments, please leave them. I love reading them, and I try to get to every single comment. And I hope you enjoy these videos. See ya.